Welcome to the Carbon Clarity podcast from Hut22, a show with interviews, news and views from the world of carbon, net zero and sustainability. I'm Kev Cooling, your host and founder of Hut22. And today I'm joined by Kenneth van Bergh, CEO and co-founder of Carbon+Alt+Delete, the online carbon accounting software. Hi, Kenneth.
Hi, Kev. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thanks. Are you okay?
All good here.
Brilliant. Well, look, thanks so much for joining me today on the first Carbon Clarity podcast. Maybe we could start, if you don't mind, by you sharing a little bit with us about how Carbon+Alt+Delete came about and why you thought it was the right time to create it when you did.
Absolutely. So Carbon+Alt+Delete is, as you said, we are a carbon accounting platform, a software for companies to calculate their full carbon footprint. We were founded 4 years ago. But actually, the story started almost 8 years ago when I was still at university doing my PhD, and together with some fellow PhD students, we founded a non-profit organization back then with a carbon calculator, but focused on households. So it was kind of a side project. But after some time, we started to get questions from companies as well to help them with calculating their carbon footprint. And then basically we took the COVID 2022 period to reflect on where we wanted to go, both professionally, right? What's the next step? Do I want to do a startup, yes or no? But also it was a very hot, it's still a hot time for sustainability, but a very prominent topic. So we did our market research and we learned that in terms of carbon accounting tooling, we still saw a gap that we tried to fill with Carbon+Alt+Delete. So it started as a side project, but then it became a real company, so to speak. And here we are, right? And
wow,
8 years later.
That's great. I mean, I love the fact it started as a not-for-profit. So you've got a PhD in mechanical engineering, right? And your co-founder has got a PhD in electrical engineering.
Yes.
So where did the link with sort of sustainability and carbon come in?
So we both studied at the University of Leuven in Belgium. So I'm a Belgian by birth, but we both studied energy markets. I'm more from the mechanical point of view. Hans Peter, my fellow founder, more from an electrical point of view. So although we were at different departments at the university, the research that we did overlapped or was very synergetic. So we met each other in working groups at conferences. He always has also been more on the software side, so the modeling guy building the computer models, which is what he still does today. I've always been more interested in real life applications and how to bring it to policymakers or to businesses, which is also still what I do today. So we're very synergetic on a lot of those points.
I mean, that's interesting, isn't it? Now that you've been doing this for 8 years and 4 years with Carbon+Alt+Delete, thinking about that practical application, what do you think are the main challenges then facing those who want to do more to report on and reduce their emissions at the moment? Do you see any particular challenge? Has it changed over those 4 or 8 years?
So for me, what I see as still the main challenge for a lot of companies reporting on their carbon footprint is data maturity, the data that they need. So although it's not purely linked to carbon footprinting, it's more a maturity issue often in companies. But that's really the first step to be resolved. And then for me, the next challenge is then really converting data into insights. And that's also how I see the future of Carbon+Alt+Delete. So today we still do a lot to help companies collecting and processing data quicker. But for me, the true added value of Carbon+Alt+Delete should be on translating carbon data into insights, actionable insights, right? And to help companies reduce their carbon footprint in the most effective and efficient way. But that's really the second step. We still see that today a lot of companies collecting the data, having the right activity data, energy, flights, commuting, that's still often a pain point.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I've been working in carbon management for about 15 years, and there isn't a single client that I work with who hasn't overestimated their ability to gather data. every single time they say, oh yeah, great, I've got all that data, I'll have it with you in 2 weeks or 3 weeks or a month. And in my head, I'm saying, okay, let me at least double that, probably even triple it, because it's always, without fail, the thing that clients absolutely struggle with is literally just getting hold of it. And to be fair, some of the data they've never collected before. They've never needed to collect it. So, okay, fair enough. It's the first time they're going to collect it. Maybe they haven't got processes in place. And some of the data they might have collected, something like it, but not for the purposes of carbon reporting. So there's almost always something to do around data. So yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. I'm really interested in your point about insights. I mean, if we cast our mind forward a little bit to a place where, and maybe some clients are there already, some of the more mature clients, perhaps you've been doing this for a while. Once we've got that critical mass of data, I guess being able to analyze it and look for opportunities is something that the platform hopefully will be able to do. Are you going to think in using machine learning and AI to do that, or how are you going to do it?
No, absolutely. So we have a bunch of ideas, and again, sometimes it's really good to start from the basics, right? Because even 1 ton CO2, we don't have a reference or mental framework to assess whether that's a high or low number. We all know that 1 million euros or pounds, it's an acceptable big chunk of money, but 1 ton CO2, 1,000 ton CO2, just helping users understand whether they have a high or low carbon footprint. It's really step one, but it's valuable. And there we are working on a benchmarking model just to compare companies with their peers, same region, same sector, scaled for their size, and then compare them, which is also a very strong trigger to action. No one likes the message, you're the bad person in the class or the bad pupil. So people like to be compared with their neighbors, and that's a strong trigger to action. Of course, going forward, it's also about identifying the most effective action. And in the end, in scope 1 and 2, it's not too complex because a lot of it is about electrification and switching to renewable electricity. But in scope 3, the different actions that companies could take is way broader, way more complex, nuanced. They cannot do it on themselves. They need to engage with their suppliers, clients, other stakeholders. So there we are indeed looking into AI to extract insights, again, on the data that we collect. And the true value, again, on Carbon+Alt+Delete is the number of granular carbon footprint data we collect from a lot of companies through the different consultancies we work with. And that's, okay, data is the new gold, right? That's an old statement, everyone says it. But I think that's really where we want to deliver value. And to say a final point on that, so we are, as I said, by origin, a non-profit organization, and we still consider ourselves as really a positive impact company. So the key metric that we track is reduction in carbon footprint per company on the platform. So we also really want to help companies reducing their carbon footprint.
Oh, that's really interesting. Perhaps we'll come back to that in a second. I think the benchmarking idea is great. That's such a valuable thing to be able to do. How many companies have you got on the platform at the moment?
So today we have around 700 to 800 companies on the platform across Europe. And I still include the UK in my definition of Europe. And some of them.
That's very generous.
Yeah. Some of them just for one year. Some of those company accounts have been reporting for the 4th or the 5th year already on the platform.
Yeah, I mean, you raise the spectre of scope 3 emissions, which is so many people now have been, well, there's still plenty of people who are only just getting started on the journey of reporting their carbon emissions, aren't there, who are just starting to get to grips with it. But even for those people, so casting my mind back 10 or 15 years, scope 3 wasn't a thing beyond water consumption, maybe something on waste. That was it, really. So when a company first started doing their emissions, they would probably only really report scope 1 and 2. But the difference today is that when a company first starts reporting their emissions, they absolutely are thinking about scope 3 already. So you've got two situations. You've got companies just starting and having to think about that whole thing all at once, and companies who've been reporting for a while who are now having to kind of really dig into the scope 3 stuff. They've got a good handle on scope 1 and 2. And the reality is, as you say, technical fixes will get you an awful long way with scope 1 and 2. They won't get you all the way, but they get you a long way. Scope 3 things, I mean, yes, technical fixes, water conservation devices or whatever it might be, but actually it's so much more about the corporate measures that you need to take around governance or your supply chain and those kinds of things too, I suppose. So are you finding that people doing reporting are kind of starting to put a lot more kind of scope 3 categories on the platform now?
Yes and no. So
okay.
Let me elaborate on that. So I think we see two different approaches, right? So some companies really start by scope 1 and 2, and then after a couple of years extend it to scope 3. Some of them also, as of day one, start with scope 3, but just more high level, using spend-based emission factors or using top-down estimates. I have so many employees, on average X miles or kilometers commuting per day. So back on the envelope calculations. Personally, I prefer the second approach, because that implies that as of day one, a company has the order of magnitudes right. They know that their scope 1 and 2 is about 10% of their overall carbon footprint. Could be 8, could be 9.5, could be 11, but order of magnitude, they have it right.
Yeah.
And that also helps them to make sure that the money that they invest in carbon mitigation measures is spent well. Maybe it's even as of day one better for a company to engage with their suppliers in scope 3 rather than trying to electrify their fleet. I'm not sure if this is a relevant example, but at least you want to have that discussion as of day one. And that's possible if you have at least the orders of scope 3 relevant, apparent. The other way around, we also sometimes see that companies spend almost too much time on scope 3, trying to boil the ocean, collect a lot of data on use of products, to then realize, it's only 5% of my carbon footprint. I will not work on it for the next 3 to 4 years. So forcing yourself to, as of day one, a full scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 carbon footprint, pragmatically with the data available, gives you, I think, a very good basis to then take the right decisions moving forward.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, actually. What I've been doing with clients on scope 3, particularly for category 1, purchase goods and services, is do a spend-based analysis, because I think the benefit that gives you is you talk about kind of engaging in your supply chain. It kind of at least gives you a point about where you need to engage. So that I think is worthwhile doing that. But I really like that idea of saying, actually, as quickly as possible, get to a point where you understand the order of magnitude of what those scope 3 emissions might be. I think that's a really good advice, actually. So then, on the platform, I think I'm right in saying you've got some spend-based emissions factors, aren't there? That's right, isn't it? What do you use?
Yeah, so we have spend-based from Axio-based. And to give you a bit more background on that, so we initially didn't have spend-based. Because we still see them as, we understand the value to do a first hotspot analysis, but the main issue for us with spend-based is that you cannot act on them, right? The only meaningful action that you can derive is spend less. But often it's the other way around. You need to sometimes increase a bit your spending to end up with a lower carbon solution. So that's why we initially didn't have them in the platform. We do got quite a bit of questions around them to add them to the platform. I think exactly for the use case that you mentioned, Kev, and which we fully understand, of course. So that's why we do have spend-based emission factors in the platform, but we still try to nudge the user to activity-based. So that's a bit the compromise we ended up with.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. I think I think what a lot of people are struggling with at the moment is definitely quantifying that stuff, particularly. And of course, when you do that analysis, that spend-based analysis, not everything sits in category 1. Actually, once you've done it, some of it is logistics, or some of it is whatever. So it kind of moves around, but use that spend-based to start with. So although I think people are struggling to come to a number, what they're also struggling with, okay, now what do I do? How do I engage with my supply chain? So I buy stuff from, I don't know, Dell or Procter and Gamble or some of these really massive companies. They're a very different prospect to engage with than your local supplier who does the catering for your meetings, because they're a very different level of maturity. So I think it's definitely something then about thinking, and I guess this is something that doesn't happen on the platform, but there's definitely something about thinking, okay, what sort of interventions should we be taking depending on both the likely impact of a particular supplier and their maturity. So I think those two things in combination can really help guide clients to thinking about, okay, maybe I speak to this supplier in this way and this supplier in this way. So I think that's a really useful thing to do. And of course, before you figure that out, your first interaction with your supplier probably will be, can you please send me some activity data? Can you please provide me with some primary data? And then you can kind of move away, I think, from that kind of really far less than accurate spend-based analysis, because it definitely isn't accurate. Okay, well, that's great. So what else then? What else have you got coming up? Sounds like you've got some interesting developments coming up around, insights and things. What other stuff is going on the platform? Have you released anything recently? I think I saw a release recently of some new stuff, didn't I?
Yes, so we keep on improving the platform basically every 5 weeks. So we have 5-week sprint cycles, like to fall back on this software speak. So we do new updates in the platform every 5 weeks. A lot of them are updates directly on request of users. And so, as you know, but it's probably worth mentioning, so we always work with sustainability consultants. So because we believe that to do a correct, compliant carbon footprint, you need an expert that basically does it day in, day out, and that can manage the process. So we work with those consultants, and they have very similar requests to improve the product, right? So we are updating the emission factor databases, adding new emission factor databases. We're looking into land sector removal guidance of the greenhouse gas protocol, which is important mainly for agricultural companies to also report on land use emissions. We keep on updating our import flow. So we have an Excel import flow to import data in Carbon+Alt+Delete. And where I'm personally most excited about is to go back to AI, and everyone is talking about AI, but we basically analyzed what AI could do to improve the Carbon+Alt+Delete platform. And the main added value is on the key pain point, data collection, right?
Yeah.
So we are now experimenting with basically document screening and getting activity data, not spend-based data, but activity data from documents, including invoices. So you take an electricity bill, and rather than reading the money spent, you capture the kilowatt hours, the time period, whether it was gray or green electricity. And that's something that looks very promising. And that's something that we are currently working on. It's still in the testing phase, but that's, for me, will really be a step change in data collection and time spent on data collection.
Yeah.
And
I think sorry, I was going to say, anything you can do to speed up that process, I'm sure it'll be welcome.
Exactly. Yeah. And then the main added value as well is that you basically take then the data from, if you go back to invoices, from the financial single source of truth, which will also make the audit process more streamlined, because now sometimes you have an Excel import that comes from a download from a system which was derived from another database. So it's kind of a complex audit trail. But when you really can go back to the original invoice, scrape it's a time efficiency gain and also a traceability gain.
Yeah. Brilliant. That sounds very exciting.
Yes, I'm very excited about it. Hans-Peter always, advised me to be a bit careful because there are still some technical challenges to get it working. But that's for me really the future of data collection in carbon accounting. And with those large language models, it's really impressive what's possible now. We actually played with it as well a couple of years ago when we started Carbon+Alt+Delete 4 years ago. But the AI back then was not scalable enough to really solve the issue of getting activity data on all type of different invoices. today it seems way more promising what it can do.
Yeah, no, it's extremely impressive, isn't it, these days? Definitely. I guess I would hope it would be with all the energy it's using to run it in the background, right?
Yes.
So that's interesting. So I just want to pick up on something you mentioned then. You talked before about being able to generate insights through data and all that kind of thing, which obviously is really useful. But you mentioned that you work with consultants because you don't engage with the end clients directly, do you?
No.
You kind of always work with a consultant. So what led you to that kind of model?
Two things. So in the early days of Carbon+Alt+Delete, we tried to sell our software directly to companies. It worked.
Yeah.
But then when they started using the software, they came back with a lot of questions, not related to the software, but really related to carbon accounting. What is scope 3? Should I include this in my scope 3? I don't have data on my transport, but can I make a guesstimate or not? And so on and so on. Then we realized, those companies, they actually, they need the software, yes, but even more importantly, they need some support of what we like to call a carbon accountant, someone who can help them, give them peace of mind, make sure everything happens correct. And based on this learning, we realized carbon accounting is basically like financial accounting. And yes, very big companies have insourced and have their own financial accountants, but a lot of medium-sized, smaller companies work with an external financial accountant, and that accountant is then using accountancy software. Yep. So we basically copy-pasted that business model. So we are today the carbon accounting software. We work with sustainability consultants or carbon accountants, like we like to call them. And they help their clients, medium-sized companies, with reporting and reducing their carbon footprint. And that's for us a very scalable model because everyone does what he or she is best at. We make a scalable product. You give advice and peace of mind to your clients, and the companies, they still need to own their numbers and feel responsible for them. And that works pretty well. It's very scalable. It's very impactful. We have not regretted that choice or go to market any second.
Well, I have to say, I mean, I've been really pleased. I'm at 22 partners with Carbon+Alt+Delete, and I've been really impressed and pleased with the way that relationship works. It's been absolutely great for me, and also my clients find it really an accessible platform too. So it's brilliant. It's a great platform. I'm really looking forward to using it more, seeing more of the new features, and I'm also looking forward to the event where we're going to meet in person in London.
Yes, absolutely. Likewise.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to it.
That's great. So who's that event for? Is it only for your consultant or is it for other people too?
So it's for everyone, but typically people with some expertise in carbon accounting. So what we have been able also to do is, regardless of the platform or besides the platform, we really have throughout Europe, built kind of a community of carbon accountants, people who are into carbon accounting, are into the details, do it for their own company or for other companies. And we have learned that a lot of those people still have similar questions on, for instance, the LSRG or on the new SBTi standards. So we have set up an online community to connect those people to just basically a Q&A forum. And we also try to do once in a while, both online through webinars and on physical events, to organize discussions, bring in an external expert to talk about specific topic. And for instance, in September, we organize an event on climate risk assessment with some external speakers, including David Carlin, where he will share his expertise on climate risk assessments for companies. And then we have a drink, and then hopefully we have an insightful and interesting evening.
Brilliant. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. Well, everybody, thank you so much for listening. Thanks so much, Kenneth, for joining me on this inaugural episode of Carbon Clarity. Look, if anybody wants to continue the discussion, please leave a comment or a review. If you want more information on carbon, jump over to either my LinkedIn or the website, hut22.co.uk, where you can find lots of content that hopefully you'll find useful or interesting, or maybe even both. Who knows?
If you want to find out more about Carbon+Alt+Delete, head over to the website carbon-alt-delete.eu.
Kenneth, thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to seeing you in person in September, and hopefully speak to you again soon.
Likewise. Thanks a lot for having me. Have a good one. Bye bye.